Hello, good evening. So when I got asked to do this talk, I was a bit stumped on how to start, and I did what any sensible young woman would do, and I went to talk to my mother. And I said, Mum, do you remember when I wanted to be a scientist? And I thought her response was quite telling. She said, no, I don't. In fact, we didn't think you were going to be a scientist. We thought you were going to be a poet, or maybe even a sailor. I said, okay. And then she paused and she said, I suppose maybe it has something to do with those pig's lungs. And I'll get to the pig's lungs in a moment, and she might be right about it. But it did make me think. I mean, I don't think as a child I even thought that being a scientist was a job. I didn't think of it at all. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. If I'm really honest with you, what I wanted to be was a private detective, and I was going to solve crimes from my garden shed. That was what I wanted to do. And I mean, obviously there's still time yet for that, but I can't remember there being a huge emphasis, especially in primary school. I think we did one experiment where we took a bunch of plants, we put them in a cupboard, and we saw what happened to them, and they all died. And I mean, at secondary school, well, with the pig's lungs come into this, I was going on open days with my dad looking at different secondary schools, and the secondary school I eventually went to, there was a set of pig's lungs that they bought to show off their science department, and they were bloody and gory, and you could blow into them and they ventilated. And I was like, yes, this is where I want to go. But actually at secondary school I didn't really have an aptitude for science. I wasn't terrible, but I was far better at humanities. I much preferred humanities. I found science really challenging, and I didn't feel very supported to go into a scientific career. And I don't think that was because I was a woman. I think my science teachers weren't really interested in prompting us to become scientists. When I was 16, we were told to go on work experience, and I was very, very lucky that I had a family friend who was a sister in surgery at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. And she got me an amazing work experience with a world-renowned skull-based surgeon called Professor Gleason. And the first ever surgery I saw was the removal of a giant cell granuloma from the jaw and skull of a man. And they were literally drilling into the skull. And I saw the brain for the first time, and it's not grey, it's pink, and it quivers, and it's beautiful. And I said, yes, this is what I want to be. I want to be a doctor. But you can't be a doctor without being good at science. So I had to go back and think, okay, I have to actually try with this science thing, particularly with chemistry, because you can't get into a university in the UK without a chemistry A-level. So my least favourite subject I had to work really hard to do. But it was, at that time it was a chore. But I think when things started to change for me was at medical school, because suddenly I saw what I was doing had an impact. We were seeing patients every day in the hospital, and we were studying physiology and pathology and anatomy, and it was hard, but it was relevant, and you could see the impact it was having on the management of the cases that you were seeing. And I loved it so much that I actually added an extra year on my very long degree to do a master's in research, and that's when I actually became a scientist. I was doing maternal and fetal health research, and I had a bleep that would wake me up in the middle of the night in preparation for when I was going to be a doctor, but the bleep woke me up for placentas. And I would go and collect freshly delivered placentas in the middle of the night, and I do in vitro experiments where I essentially brought them back to life, and we were looking at the microscopic and macroscopic changes to see what placentas can tell us about what went wrong in a pregnancy. But I was literally the Frankenstein of placentas. I was bringing them back to life. It was great. And I published stuff. People wanted to know what I was doing, and that felt really validated. I went to conferences and people were interested because I was questioning the way that we do placental pathology, and I felt like suddenly I was doing something worthwhile. And then I became a doctor, and it was the first time in my life that I experienced sexism. And I started realizing the challenges you face as a woman in science. In my first job, I was called Barbie for 4 months because I was the only female doctor. In another position, my clinical supervisor told me that the downfall of the NHS was because of women, because we all want to get pregnant and look after our babies at home. And that was ruining training programs. I was also told by senior doctors, colleagues of mine, that I should never apply for a surgical training post because surgical boards preferentially chose men over women. I don't think that's true, but I think that's what they thought. And then I was also told many times, I overheard conversations that I think Trump would probably describe as locker room talk. I mean, it was just a world that I hadn't anticipated. Now, these were the minority of experiences. I've had an enormity of experiences being a doctor, and I've worked with generous, supportive male and female colleagues who are egalitarians. But they stuck with me, and they stuck with me because I did not know how to deal with them, because I had been brought up by two parents, mum and dad, who were feminists and said I could be whatever I wanted to be. I grew up in a school system that told me I could be anything. I went to a medical school where I was equal to my male colleagues, and then suddenly I was getting these chauvinistic comments and I didn't know what to say. And my immediate reaction was actually to be quiet, because I didn't want to cause a fuss. No, I don't feel that way anymore, but that's how I felt at the time. I'm a clinical research fellow now, which means that I mainly do research. So I predominantly do scientific research, and I'm working in a really exciting field, or at least I think it is. I'm working in therapeutic ultrasound. So that's essentially using high pressure sound waves to travel through the body harmlessly, and when they are focused at a point, they can cause burning. So you can do surgery non-invasively without cutting into the skin. So it's incredible. And it also means that you can do it in so many different specialties. So you can do it in neurosurgery, you can go to even obstetrics, you can go into, you can do what I'm doing, which is looking at oncology applications. And I'm leading a big team, and I've got a lot of senior people on my team, medical physicists, doctors, who are actually much more senior than me. And I think from my experiences, what I've learned is that actually I know how to manage those situations better, and I know how to challenge those situations better. And thankfully, I don't actually experience that in my day-to-day job at the moment. But at some point really soon, I'm going to have to go back to being a doctor and actually treating patients, because the General Medical Council will ask me what I'm doing. And at that point, I'm going to have to start thinking, because I want to continue being a researcher, but being a research doctor, you have to do two jobs. You have to do your on-calls, and then you go home and you write your grants and you write your papers. And that's fine now, because I don't have kids, although my partner might find it a bit frustrating. But actually, at some point, I do want to have a family, and I'm going to have to think about that. And I don't have the solution right now. I think that we do need to do more for women in science, particularly clinical academics. I think we need to think about job shares for clinical academics so they can share their clinical time. There should be considerations for money going towards to childcare for parents in academia. And I think some of the medical specialties really do need to think about adapting their training systems for women, because most medical schools now are 60% female, and so there's the growing female workforce that they're going to have to think about. And there's some days I just think, oh God, maybe I should just sail off and do loads of poetry like my parents said. But something brings us back, and I think the scientists in the room, you know what I mean, is that it may be the gore of pig's lungs, or like the awe of seeing a really cool surgery, or just like the satisfaction of solving a really hard equation, or just simply knowing that something you're doing is going to have a good positive impact on somebody else. And I think it's those feelings that keep us at it and make us persist and do it. And I just hope that in the future we'll see more and more women and more girls getting to have those fantastic experiences in science. Thank you.